In 48 hours, a solar eclipse hits. What nobody is telling you about the door it permanently closes. In 48 hours, the moon will move directly between the Earth and the sun, not partially, not at an angle, directly. For several minutes, the largest source of light in our solar system will be sealed behind the moon's shadow, and in the sky above you, what was blazing and certain will become dark and total. A solar eclipse. And most people will look at photographs of it, read a headline or two, and move on with their day. But here is what nobody is telling you. This particular solar eclipse is not simply an astronomical event, it is a seal being pressed into wax. And the impression it leaves will shape the months that follow in ways that only become visible in retrospect, the way you only understand what a door closed on when you are standing in the room you ended up in. By the time this video is over, you will understand 3 things that almost no standard forecast will tell you. First, what a solar eclipse actually does at a structural level, not symbolically but mechanically, in the architecture of a cycle. Second, why this specific eclipse arrives at a moment so precisely loaded that ignoring it is not neutral. And third, what you must not do in the 48 hours before it hits, and what you must do instead, because the action you take or do not take in this window will determine which side of the sealed door you are standing on when it closes. Stay here, because the eclipse does not wait for you to be ready. It only waits for its geometry to arrive. And in 48 hours, the geometry is exact. Let me start with what a solar eclipse actually is. Not the poetic version, the mechanical one. The moon orbits the Earth in an ellipse. The Earth orbits the sun. Roughly twice a year, these 3 bodies align so precisely that the moon's shadow falls on the Earth's surface in a narrow band, the path of totality. During totality, the sun disappears, not dimmed. Disappeared. The sky darkens to a twilight that belongs to no hour of the day. Stars become visible in daylight hours. The temperature drops. Animals behave as though night has arrived. And then, as the alignment shifts, the sun returns. What makes this mechanically remarkable is the coincidence of scale. The sun is approximately 400 times larger than the moon, but the sun is also approximately 400 times further away from the Earth than the moon. This means that from our vantage point, they appear almost exactly the same size. During a total solar eclipse, the moon fits over the sun like a key in a lock precisely, exactly, completely. This is not a feature of every solar system. It is specific to ours, specific to this moment in geological history, specific to the arrangement of bodies we happen to occupy. The ancient world did not know the mechanism, but they registered the effect. Every civilization that left records of total solar eclipses described the same thing: a crack in the ordinary. A moment when the normal rules of daylight were suspended and something else became visible that the ordinary sky concealed. In Babylonian astronomical records, solar eclipses were called the death and rebirth of the sun, not because the sun actually died, but because what the eclipse produced in its wake was a condition of genuine renewal, a before and after, a chapter that ended and a chapter that began, a door that closed on one world and opened on another. And they were precise about one thing that modern forecasts tend to soften. The solar eclipse does not simply open a door, it closes one first. And what it closes permanently. This is the part nobody is telling you. The total lunar eclipse on March 3rd that began this sequence, the blood moon at 12 degrees Virgo on the south node, was the eclipse of release, of letting go, of the south node pulling away what no longer belonged to you. That eclipse was the kind that reaches in and removes. Surgical, sometimes brutal, always precise. A solar eclipse on the north node is a different instrument entirely. Where the lunar eclipse removes, the solar eclipse seals. It closes the chapter that the lunar eclipse opened. It takes what was loosened, what was revealed, what was finally brought to light, and it presses a seal into that moment, making the before and after permanent. What was released in March will not be reinstated. What was revealed will not return to hiding. What cracked open cannot be resealed by the same pressure that once held it. The solar eclipse in 48 hours is the moment that the sequence becomes irreversible. And this is why the 48 hours before it hits matter more than almost any other window in this entire year. Because a seal only functions if there is something to seal. A door only closes on what is standing in the doorway when it swings shut. And right now, in the final hours before this eclipse, the doorway is still open. What you bring to the threshold in the next 48 hours is what will be sealed inside the new chapter. What you leave on the other side is what gets locked out of it permanently. This is not a metaphor. In the astrological record, the events and decisions and truths that land in the 7 2-hour window surrounding a solar eclipse carry a structural weight that ordinary moments do not. Not because the cosmos arbitrarily assigns importance to calendar windows, but because the alignment of these three bodies, Earth, Moon, Sun, produces a condition of maximum gravitational and electromagnetic concentration. Your body, which is mostly water, is not a passive observer of these tidal forces. It is subject to them. You are standing in the shadow of a doorway right now, and in 48 hours, that doorway closes. Let me tell you what this specific solar eclipse is carrying, because eclipses do not arrive without context. They arrive as part of a series, on an axis, in a sign, at a degree, and all of those specifics matter. This solar eclipse lands in Aries, not just any degree of Aries. It lands in the sign that Saturn and Neptune cracked open at 0 degrees on February 20th, the same sign where Venus made the 9,000-year cycle personal when she stepped into it, the same sign that the astrological new year opened into on March 20th when every planet turned direct simultaneously. Aries has been the epicenter of this entire sequence. And now a solar eclipse arrives to seal what the sequence began. In the ancient understanding of eclipse series, each eclipse on an axis completes what the previous one started. The lunar eclipse in Virgo on March 3rd stripped away with the precision of a surgical instrument the daily structures, the habitual arrangements, the routines that had outlived the truth they were built to serve. Virgo is the sign of discernment, of the work that occupies your daily hours, of the body that carries your life from morning to night. The lunar eclipse there said, "Some of what you are doing every day is no longer serving the person you are becoming." That stripping was real. And now the solar eclipse in Aries answers it. Aries is the sign of identity, of who you are when you are not performing for anyone's expectations, of the self that exists before the accommodations began. The solar eclipse in Aries is sealing a new identity into place. Not a dramatic reinvention, a clarification. A moment when what you actually are is given more structural authority than what you have been pretending to be. And the 48 hours before it hits are the last hours in which you can consciously choose what that identity includes. Because the eclipse does not consult your preferences when it seals. It seals what is real. It seals what is actually present at the moment the geometry aligns. Not what you intended to be present, not what you planned to have ready, what is actually there. So the question the next 48 hours are asking is deceptively simple. Who are you being right now? In the actual present tense of your life. And is that who you want sealed into the next chapter? Your body already knows something is coming. Let me describe what the pre-eclipse field feels like. Because if you have been experiencing any of these things in the past several days, they are not random. They are the eclipse making contact before it arrives. The first thing many people report in the days before a solar eclipse is a quality of compression, as though time is behaving slightly differently than usual. Hours that feel shorter than they should. A sense that something is approaching from a direction you cannot quite identify. Not dread, more like the feeling of a storm that has not yet broken, the atmospheric pressure that precedes it. That compression is real. As the eclipse geometry tightens, the gravitational field shifts in measurable ways. Your body registers this as urgency without a clear object. Something in you knows the window is closing, even if your conscious mind has not yet named what the window is. The second thing people report is an increase in the volume of the inner voice, the one that says the things you prefer not to hear in ordinary circumstances. The one that knows, without evidence, you would accept in rational conversation what is true about your life and what is performance. Under the pre-eclipse field, that voice becomes harder to dismiss. It grows insistent. It returns. It surfaces in the gap between one task and the next, in the moment before sleep arrives, in the first seconds of waking before the daily management begins. This is not your anxiety speaking. This is your discernment. The eclipse is concentrating the frequency of clarity that Virgo's lunar eclipse initiated, now pressed into the specific territory of Aries' identity. What you actually are is pressing to be acknowledged before the seal closes on who you will be. The third sign is a heightened experience of endings, small ones and large ones. A conversation that concludes differently than you expected. A habit that simply stops working. A relationship that reaches a moment of natural threshold with no drama attached. Things that have been edging toward completion reach it in the days before a solar eclipse with a frequency that is not coincidental. The eclipse is cleaning house, not cruelly, precisely. It is identifying what belongs on the other side of the door and what belongs in the chapter that is closing. And the body recognizes this, even when the mind is still arguing that nothing needs to end. Here is what you must not do in the next 48 hours. And I want to be specific about this, because the mistake most people make with eclipse windows is they treat them as ordinary time. They make decisions from habit. They speak from unexamined impulse. They begin things that require the clarity of a settled field to be built correctly. Do not sign a new agreement. The eclipse seals things, and any agreement made in the 48 hours before a solar eclipse is sealed with the full weight of the eclipse's authority. That is not always a problem. But if the agreement contains even a small compromise of what is actually true for you, a detail you are telling yourself is minor, a condition you are hoping will change, a commitment you are making from fear rather than genuine direction, the eclipse will seal that compromise into the foundation of what comes next. The eclipse does not distinguish between what you meant and what you said. It seals what is. Do not begin a confrontation from unprocessed emotion. The pre-eclipse field amplifies everything. A conversation that would be difficult under ordinary conditions becomes seismically loaded in the 48 hours before an eclipse, not because you are wrong about what needs to be addressed, but because the timing means the conversation will carry far more structural weight than you intend. What you say in this window has more permanence than usual. Save the hard conversations for the 72 hours after the eclipse, when the field has settled and the new structure has had time to become clear. Do not attempt to reinstall something the lunar eclipse removed. This is the trap that catches the most people. Something was loosened or revealed or stripped away in March, and some version of you has been quietly working to reconstruct it, the old habit, the old story, the old version of the relationship or role that the eclipse identified as no longer serving you. In the compression of the pre-eclipse window, that reconstruction effort will feel urgent. It will feel necessary. It will feel like the right thing to do. It is not. The lunar eclipse removed what it removed precisely. What it identified as ready to go was ready to go. Attempting to reinstall it in the 48 hours before the solar eclipse is not restoration. It is placing yourself on the wrong side of a door that is about to permanently close. Here is what you must do instead. Tonight, before another day passes, sit with a piece of paper and answer one question. Who have I been in the chapters this entire sequence has been building since February 20th when the ground shifted, through March 3rd when the veil came down, through March 20th when every planet turned forward, and is that the person I want sealed into the next cycle? Not who you aspire to be, not who you are working toward. Who you have actually been in the real texture of your days since this sequence began. Because the eclipse seals what is real, and what has been real in you since February 20th, the qualities you have been living, the directions you have been moving, the truths you have allowed yourself to speak, that is what the seal will press into the wax of the next chapter. If you have been moving toward honesty, the eclipse seals honesty into the foundation. If you have been moving toward the open door, Jupiter in Cancer showed you the one that leads to what you actually need rather than what you settled for. The eclipse seals that movement into the structure of what comes next. If you have been brave enough, even once, to take the first step in a real direction rather than a comfortable one, the eclipse amplifies and enshrines that step. But if you have been waiting, if the past weeks have been ones of intention without action, of knowing without moving, then the eclipse seals the waiting too. Not as punishment, as precision. It seals what is actually there. So the only question that matters in the next 48 hours is, what is actually there? And the practice for this window is not complicated. Tonight, write down one thing that has become genuinely true about you since February 20th. Not a hope, a reality. Something you have actually lived in the body of your actual life. One real thing. Then tomorrow, before the eclipse geometry arrives, say it out loud to someone. Not for their response, not for their validation. Simply to let it exist in the world outside your own interior before the seal closes. Because a truth spoken aloud in the pre-eclipse window is the kind of seed that the eclipse presses into the deepest layer of the new structure. It does not simply inform the next chapter. It becomes part of its foundation in a way that private knowing cannot achieve. The eclipse is not asking you to be finished. It is not asking you to have resolved everything the sequence has been working on since February. It is asking you to be real about where you actually are, and to let that reality be what gets sealed rather than the performance of where you intended to be. 48 hours from now, the moon will slide directly between you and the sun. The light that you have been navigating by will disappear from the sky, and in that moment of structured darkness, the threshold will close on one version of your life and open on another. You are not a passive observer of this. You are standing in the doorway. And what you bring to that threshold, what you have chosen to be real about, what truth you have let leave the interior and enter the world, is what walks through with you into the chapter the eclipse is sealing open. Whatever has moved in you since February 20th is not an accident. The sequence has been specific and intentional and aimed. This eclipse is its culmination, not its conclusion. What begins in the new chapter will build for the rest of this year and into the next. But it is the moment the foundation is sealed. And in 48 hours, the seal is pressed. Write in the comments what is actually true about you right now. Not what you are working toward, not what you want to be. What is genuinely real, in the body of your life, in the days since this year's sequence began. That truth is what the eclipse is sealing. Let it be seen before the seal closes. Subscribe and turn on the bell, because in the hours following the eclipse, I will walk you through the post-eclipse integration, what the new structure reveals when the sun returns, and how to read what the seal has pressed into the foundation of your next chapter. The universe has spoken. What comes next is in your hands. The threshold will close on one version of your life and open on another. You are not a passive observer of this. You are standing in the doorway, and what you bring to that threshold, what you have chosen to be real about, what truth you have let leave the interior and enter the world is what walks through with you into the chapter the eclipse is sealing open. Whatever has moved in you since February 20th is not an accident. The sequence has been specific and intentional and aimed. This eclipse is its culmination. Not its conclusion. What begins in the new chapter will build for the rest of this year and into the next. But it is the moment the foundation is sealed, and in 48 hours, the seal is pressed. Write in the comments what is actually true about you right now, not what you are working toward, not what you want to be. What is genuinely real, in the body of your life, in the days since this year's sequence began. That truth is what the eclipse is sealing. Let it be seen before the seal closes. Subscribe and turn on the bell, because in the hours following the eclipse, I will walk you through the post-eclipse integration, what the new structure reveals when the sun returns, and how to read what the seal has pressed into the foundation of your next chapter. The universe has spoken. What comes next is in your hands. And there is one more dimension to this eclipse that almost no forecast is addressing. Because the solar eclipse in Aries does not arrive only as the culmination of this year's sequence. It arrives as the opening move in a new eclipse series, the Aries-Libra axis, that will continue to fire over the next 18 months. This particular eclipse is the first in that series. The seed eclipse, the one whose degree and theme will echo through every subsequent eclipse on this axis until the series completes. What that means is this. Whatever is sealed in the next 48 hours is not only the foundation of the next chapter, it is the seed of the next 18 months of eclipses. The theme that gets pressed into the wax today will be returned to, deepened, expanded, tested, and ultimately completed by every eclipse that follows on this axis, which makes the 48 hours before this one more significant than the 48 hours before almost any other eclipse you will live through. Not because it determines everything that follows. Eclipses are not deterministic, but because it sets the initial condition from which everything that follows will develop. A seed is not the tree, but the tree grows from the seed. And the specific nature of the seed, the quality of what was real in you when it was pressed into the ground, is what the tree expresses. Your job in the next 48 hours is simply to be a genuine seed, not a performance of a seed. Not a seed pretending to be a different kind of tree than it actually is. A genuine one, carrying what is actually true, moving in the direction you have actually chosen, being the specific person you have actually become through the months this sequence has been building. The eclipse will do the rest. It will press you into the ground with the full weight of its cosmic geometry. It will seal you into the foundation of what comes next. And what grows from that sealed foundation will be precisely as real as what you brought to the threshold when the door closed. 48 hours. The geometry is already tightening. The doorway is already narrowing. And somewhere in the architecture of what has been real in your life since this sequence began, since the ground shifted on February 20th, since the veil came down on March 3rd, since every planet turned forward on March 20th, the specific truth of who you have been and who you are becoming is waiting to be spoken aloud before the seal closes on silence. Speak it. Let it be real. Let the eclipse find it and seal it into the stone of the next chapter. That is what the 48 hours before a solar eclipse are for. Not preparation, not completion. Presence. The specific, honest, undisguised presence of who you actually are at this precise moment in the sequence the sky has been composing since February. The eclipse seals what is present. Make sure what is present is real.